This cover looks interesting. Akira Amano. That's a name I haven't heard in a while. I guess one chapter couldn't hurt. I swear this happens every time I find a really good one. One of my favorite genres that I enjoy reading besides fantasy, sci-fi, and the supernatural is the mystery genre. Maybe it's because of the unknown of each story/case that makes me ask questions, seeing clues or hints along with the protagonist, make me come up with theories, and when it's eventually revealed, it could come off as a surprise and make me want to go back and pay more attention to the hints the writers drop. There are good examples to do this, and then there are bad ones. But what probably makes a good mystery to me is during the telling of the sequence of events, every clue that wasn't covered is being pieced together to make a clear and satisfying puzzle. And that's what drove me into reading Ron Kamanohashi, Deranged Detective. Already the title sounds interesting. It sounds like an eccentric madman that goes crazy solving mysteries. So let's get started, shall we? The series was created by Akira Amano, a mangaka who is well known for her manga anime shonen series Hitman Reborn, and to a lesser extent ED Live, two manga that I'm definitely going to be covering in the future. The series was launched in Shonen Jump in October 2020, and after 96 chapters, ended the first half of the story, going on hiatus for a while and returning during June 2023, where its current release chapters are a total of 109 as of the time of this recording, along with having an anime adaptation that is currently airing. So the first chapter starts by introducing one of the protagonists, Ron Kamanohashi, who was a student at Detective Training Alchemy Blue, which is the world's most prestigious academy for training detectives. Both the staff and his peers were astonished that he solved an unsolvable crime, and even one of the teachers questioned if he could clear all the world's unsolved mysteries. It is then he announced that he will offer his exceptional talents as a lifelong detective. We then cut to 5 years later, where we get introduced to our second protagonist, Totomaru Ishiki, who was ordered to go home by his boss, despite Totomaru insisting he can help with the serial killer case. But his boss can't deal with having incompetent guys hanging around, so she continues to put her foot down. We learn that despite being very terrible doing his job on the investigation team, he still wants to help find the culprit and make the city a little less scary for people. Then this guy, who on the wiki is called Kiku, suggests to Totomaru that there might be someone who can solve this case. A private detective, you could say, and sends him to an address where the detective lives. He even gave Totomaru a picture. And what do you know? It's Ron. Let's see how he's doing after 5 years. Well, it could have been worse. Yeah, looks like the past 5 years hasn't been going so well for Ron, as he's in a depressing slump. His room is barren, he doesn't have TV or internet access, and the only company he has is his cat, which was given to him as a present from Kiku. Basically, he's a shut-in who had a terrible tragedy happen to him and hit rock bottom afterwards, trying to keep himself occupied by doing stuff like naming every hair on his arms and creating a diagram from that, or knitting a 100-meter scarf. I wonder if you can use that as a blanket. Anyways, Totomaru asks for Ron for help on the case, but Ron keeps interrupting him, saying that Totomaru wasn't the first one to come and ask for help. As in the past, Kiku sent young, bright, optimistic officers over to Ron in hopes of being Ron's partner, but he broke his noses and sent them packing, wondering why Kiku sent them in the first place when he knows why he stopped doing detective work in the first place. Totomaru continues to try to ask Ron for help, but Ron earplugs him out, quite literally, saying that he doesn't want to hear anything about the case. And even smacking Totomaru's phone out of his hand when his boss called him. The phone got turned on speaker and his boss, named Amamiya, tells Totamaru that there's been a sixth victim over in Shibuya at Kazana Park, and she wants Totamaru to go over there, mostly because he's the closest one in that area. Totamaru tries to leave, but after hearing the call about the case, Ron starts to stand up, shivers all over his body, stating that he does want to solve mysteries for a living as he feels that it's his calling, but due to a fatal flaw that was discovered at his school, he couldn't continue working as a detective. That's why he's a shut-in with no access to outside information, as even watching or listening about an ongoing case will bring out the overwhelming urge to solve it himself. With that explanation out of the way, Totamaru decides that he should bring Ron with him to the case, saying that there's nothing more than saving people's lives and stopping a serial killer, and no matter what, he'll support Ron. Ron reluctantly agrees, warning Totamaru to never take his eyes off him, and both of them run to the scene of the crime. When they get there, an officer is waiting for them, giving some information about the victim and his last appearance. Then Ron proceeds to lay down next to the corpse and talk to it like it's alive. So he's a necromancer! I'm kidding, but he does find vital clues on the body about the serial killer's patterns, such as none of them have visible wounds, no alcohol or drugs in their systems, their valuables were stolen, and were discovered drowned in places without water. The problem is that despite the victims being all men, none of them have anything in common, as the bodies were headed into different social gatherings all over the place in that area. And Totamaru mentions that even with the limited area space, there's no way that area where large men could be drowned without any resistance. Then Ron dramatically sweeps his bangs, saying that there's a place like that and he solved the mystery. But first, they need a plan. Ron borrows money from Totamaru and dresses him up in designer clothes to go undercover. Then Ron suggests that Totamaru needs a haircut and stands outside the barbershop to wait on him, drinking brown sugar syrup? Is that even edible? Anyway, Totamaru gets settled in and the barber starts to fill the sink with water. Water that suspiciously knocked Totamaru out. And before the barber could do anything else, Ron enters the shop proclaiming that the serial killer is the barber. And Totamaru is okay too. He was asked by Ron to hold his breath for a minute while the sink was being filled. And that sink is the murder method the barber used, as it is filled with oxygen-defined air, where if a person takes one breath of that air, they'll faint. And the way Ron figured it out it was the barber was how all the victims had longish hair and undyed roots. Plus, if you're going to a social gathering and want to look good, you go to the barber. And the barber chooses first-time wealthy customers as his targets so the crime wouldn't be traced back to him. On top of that, he talks to his customers to see if they live alone and if they mention they're going to the barber to anyone else. Add on to the fact that the shop was the only one that you couldn't see from the outside, and you got yourself enough evidence to arrest this guy. Evidence that was recorded onto Totamaru's phone. The barber makes a hasty retreat to the rooftop but gets blocked off. Totamaru questioned why go through all the trouble of murdering 6 people, and the answer was simple: a grudge. The barber was tricked in the past by some rich people and ended up in debt, so in revenge, killed rich targets. Then something weird happens as Ron, in a trace-like state, asks the barber to off himself by jumping off the roof, saying that those who make light of others' lives have no right to exist in this world. And the barber actually listens, almost dying if not for Totamaru jumping after him and catching him. Ron recovers whatever happened to him, feeling guilty that he pressured someone to kill themselves, only for him to be surprised that the culprit is still alive thanks to Totamaru. He questioned why someone would be stupid enough to not only help him but risk his life to save a serial killer without a moment's hesitation. Unfortunately, he doesn't have much time to think on it further as Totamaru's grip is slipping and is about to fall along with the culprit, so Ron uses some bungee rope and string Totomaru and the culprit's foot back to the ledge, saving them from falling. In the aftermath, Totomaru learns from Ron that his fatal flaw of being a detective is that he pressure kills any culprits he finds, while also having no self-awareness or memory that at the time, given a reason why he was in a trance after finding out the culprit's motives and recovering from it. But thanks to Totomaru, the culprit was alive so he can be arrested, and Ron figured out why Kiku sent Totomaru to him, as he could be the partner that Ron needs after all this time. And so Ron declares that starting today, Totomaru brings him any cases that comes his way, as he will solve them and help him become a famous detective. And that's the first chapter, and already it sets up some things. Ron and Totomaru's partnership, and the mystery behind Ron's tragedy and fatal flaw. Of course, getting to the answer will be hard as there is an antagonistic force behind the incident as they test Ron, but I'll discuss them later on in the video. But before I go further on, there are some things I need to mention. 1. I will only be talking about part 1 of the manga for this review because it's self-contained and somewhat wraps up the main mystery that was introduced. Plus, I want to talk about part 2 when it's finally done, not when it's currently at maybe 5%. 2. There will be mild spoilers for some of the chapters of part 1, so if the summary that I did already sounds interesting to you, I would recommend checking out this video later when you caught up with either part 1 or the current chapter that was released. Or check out the anime with its first season. With that out of the way, let's continue with the rest of the review, starting with the art style. This segment is going to be short as I wish I could say all the things I want to say about the art of Amano-san, but I plan to save most of it for when I cover Reborn. Let's say that compared to when she started on Reborn, it's like night and day. She perfected her art style, and one of the most noticeable things about Amano's style is that her art is very beautiful. Each cover has a watercolor aesthetic that blends the colors so well and has a glow or shine to them. And her character designs, while having realistic body proportions, there's still some exaggeration in the eyes and facial expressions. Even if I couldn't remember Amano-san's name, I would have been able to tell this is her work from similar character designs of the main character. Plus, there are a lot of details in both the hair and clothing, with a lot of fluff in their hair as well as the creases in their clothing. Plus, they have a lot of clothing. Like, I am insanely jealous of how much drip these people have. Where you shop at? From Ron's shaggy appearance to Totomaru's bland outfit but innocent-like face to Ron's eyes when his kill-on-sight ability activates, there's enough to tell you that it's going to be serious, but there's also going to be some lighthearted stuff in there too. Let's start with the titular character himself, Ron Kamanohashi. From the first on-screen appearance after the 5-year time skip, he was slowly starting to become my favorite. He displays his detective knowledge by gathering context clues from Totomaru when they first meet and makes correct deductions based on that. He has an addiction to brown sugar syrup to the point where he puts it on everything he eats, likes platypuses, disguises himself using costumes and aliases when helping Totomaru on cases, and channels his inner spirit medium by lying down next to the corpses and talking to them while examining. But he's not without his flaws, as he can get tunnel vision while solving cases, being apathetic and rude to everything and the people around him, on top of being bored if there's no cases to solve, which I can relate to when it comes to some of the things I enjoy doing. And he's not that bad of a guy. Despite not being the most sociable of people, he cares about people's lives and feels immense guilt whenever he accidentally pressures someone to kill themselves. You can't help but to root for him as he figures out who did this to him and learns about the tragedy 5 years ago in order to move past it and become a detective again. And now he's up there on the list as one of my favorite eccentric characters in fiction. Then we have Totomaru, or Toto as Ron calls him dad. He's the pure-hearted, empathic, and straightforward person of the duo, oftentimes speaking and acting before he thinks, being a little gullible at times, but is dedicated to his job as a detective as much as Ron, as he wants to save people as much as he can. There are so many as much in my script, I didn't even realize that. And while he did start out pretty incompetent at detective work thanks to Ron, he slowly but surely gained some detective knowledge and how each culprit of every case got away with murder. Plus, the two help each other out in some ways. Ron helps out Toto solving cases, and Ron starts to warm up to the people around him after spending time with Toto. And speaking of people, there are a few supporting cast members that occasionally pop up every once in a while to help the duo with some of the cases. Let's start with Amamiya. She's the leader of the first investigation division and Toto's boss. While she doesn't have that much relevance in the story right now, she displays a hard-working, smart, deducting person. And while she did underestimate Toto at the start, she learns that he works just as hard as she does and starts to respect him. Somewhat. For example, in chapter 36, when a person who was recently close to Toto got murdered, requested to be assigned to the case, but Amamiya declined him at first, reminding him not to bring personal emotions to work. Then she remembers an event in her past and changes her mind by faking a phone call. While we don't know what event she was thinking of, it does give up some setup that will hopefully be paid off in later parts of the manga. Next we have Omito Kwasemi. He's a police detective from a separate district and Amamiya's old co-worker. And his personality is like a person with OCD but on crack, as he's often seen carrying around a pair of tweezers to point out or correct all kinds of disorders, and have no qualms to call attention to other people's messes or mistakes and uses his tweezers on them, otherwise known as his tweezer discipline. That observant behavior helped him solve the most murder cases in the country and be given the nickname Eagle Eye Kasemi. And similar to Ron, he may be a bit cold to others, but he deeply cares for his subordinates to the point where he's lying for them in order to protect them. Like in chapter 6, where he lied to Toto and Ron about what happened to the culprit while pursuing them in order to protect his right-hand man. Only to realize that his strictness caused his partner immense stress and pressure to live up to Kasemi's standards. Afterwards, he began to be more careful with his behavior and suppress his direct comments. However, he stilts himself too much, and as a result, he starts to make mistakes and fall into a case-solving slump, which leads to Amamiya sending Toto to help him with the case he's working on. Mostly because she wants to hear how bad his slump is, but he does get over it later with Ron's help. For a character that only appears in 3 chapters, he does get some pretty good development, and I hope I get to see him in later parts. Then we have Mofo Yusaki, a world-renowned neurosurgeon who does surgeries on a microscopic scale, and is a genius who is hyper-specialized in medicine, but is also known to be the clumsiest person alive that even Marcy from Amphibia will be worried for her. But when it comes to her work, she's very earnest and focused on preserving human life, as she believes it's invaluable. She's the one who Ron asked for help about his ability, and she was willing to develop a way to suppress Ron's kill-on-sight ability. However, it requires that he has to take a combination of various experimental medicines and not-so-safe methods. On Ron's insistence, Mofu allows him to take the medicine in her presence. It goes well as you can expect it, as in chapter 28, the chapter that introduced the medicine. After finding the culprit and the method that he did to kill, the medicine worked, but causing Ron to be knocked unconscious for a few days, as well as gaining lost memories from his childhood. She was about to revoke the medicine she developed, but Toto begs to let Ron take it, even when she's not there, and she agrees to it. Overall, she's a sweet but determined person who cares about people's well-being. And finally, Chikori Monkey, a crime reporter for the newspaper Lime Weekly and a Myers detective due to being rescued from a kidnapping case when she was younger. In chapter 14, she was put in charge of writing a section in the newspaper, and after learning and researching about Toto's accomplishments from the past few cases, She grew to love him and wants to write about him, leading into her shadowing him for the day. She's pretty enjoyable to see, and I like the dynamic of her revering Toto like a high-status celebrity or god, while being annoyed with Ron, wondering why he's even near Toto in the first place with his high and mighty attitude. But Ron sees an opportunity with Chikori as she can provide valuable information on cases, and she does do that on separate occasions. Sometimes it's good to exploit your friend's connections. Oh wait, that came out wrong. Overall, a very enthusiastic character. The Detective Training Academy Blue is a minor antagonist in Part 1, and the reason why Ron can't become a public detective just yet. The reason being a past incidents of him pursuing culprits that ended up dying, so they expelled him, revoked his detective license, and banned him from doing any detective work. And if he's ever caught, he'll be reported and sentenced to death. A little extreme for my tastes, however, they do give a reason saying that a detective who kills people must not be tolerated. So I guess they're following the Batman code. That's the reason why Toto will appear like he's solving mysteries by himself with Ron helping from the shadows. But it seems that in Chapter 3, Blue caught on some rumors that Ron is back in the detective game and discussed that if the chance he's doing detective work, there could be a major casualty. So the principal, Emmy Elrich, decides that there should be an investigation on him, and tracking instructor Spitchfield volunteers to go see if the rumors were true. He trails Ron, seeing him win a trip to a hot springs resort and disguise himself as a receptionist there. And after a murder that occurred and was solved thanks to our duo here, he corners Ron, and it seems like he was about to report him, but Ron caught on earlier that he was desperate for something, and so Spitz gave up on the act and begs Ron for help on a case. Ron declines, but Spitz figures it's because he's a Blue instructor and so he couldn't be trusted. So he spends the next few chapters working his way to help Toto and Ron with any investigation they might come across. There's also a few more Blue instructors that cross paths with the duo, like the Autopsy, Locked Room, and Closed Circle, who all play key roles in helping Ron solve the mystery of his incident. But I'll get to them in a little bit. For now, I really want to talk about the pacing/consistency of this story. One of the things I observed while reading this manga was that it doesn't waste any time. Makes sense with Part 1 having 96 chapters and each chapter being around 30 to 35 pages. That's around 3,100 pages to tell a self-contained story. But I think Amano-san did this really well, as each chapter either adds consistency, a character moment, character building, or more information about the incident that happened to Ron. Chapter 1 was about introducing the duo and Ron's condition. Chapter 2 was learning some information about Blue and the potential consequences of Ron returning to detective work, as well as showing how each case might go and where Amamiya develops a crush on Ron. Chapters 3 and 4 follows up on that potential consequence plot point by having an investigation done on Ron, Fitch volunteering, and information involving Ron's next car. Chapters 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 introduce Kasemi and Mafu respectively. And you starting to get the picture? Any plot-related clue or info are given in small amounts rather than over explanation that feels like exposition. The story has a balance of plot-related cases and non-plot-related cases to give the reader some breathing room. Personally, some of my favorite chapters came from non-plot related cases with focusing on the characters interacting. For example, the missing cabbages case has every supporting character come to Ron's apartment to celebrate Toto's birthday with a hot pot party. The problem is that there's no cabbages being sold anywhere in town, and without cabbage in a hot pot is the equivalent of removing a sturdy piece from a Jenga tower. This leads everybody to come up with possible explanation as to who might have done it and how. It reminds me of some of my friend groups in Discord and discussion and theory crafting that happen in them. Like one person will suggest something, but someone else might suggest that might not be it and come up with a different theory and the explanation behind it. At least this group is a lot less chaotic than the ones that I usually go to. Some of my favorite deductions are that the culprit is a farmer who dumps pesticides in a fit of anger and regretted it, so they went to collect as many as they can. And another is a jewel thief who, when fleeing the scene, shoved the stolen diamonds in a loaded truck full of cabbages. But the truck took off, and by the time they tracked it down, the cabbages had been unloaded, so they went around buying all the cabbages nearby. Funny enough, the culprit turns out to be Spitz, who went to the stores in the area and bought every cabbage just because he hates them. It's a story full of character interaction and funny moments. And it has one of the best payoffs where all of Ron's aliases come back to bite him, only for him to come up with an excuse that there are days he doesn't feel like using his real name, instead uses nicknames. And everyone bought it. Another example is the Genius Composer Kidnapping, which involves a kidnapper named Hummingbird and the several kidnapping cases where he sends a greeting card similar to a fan letter and they kidnaps well-known geniuses from all sorts of fields. The strangest thing is that he always released his victims after a certain period of time, and the reason why is actually pretty sweet. Hear me out for a bit. After an attempt kidnapping of a singer, the duo managed to corner Hummingbird, and it turns out that he's doing this for his daughter. His daughter is a musical genius who was raised to be the next top pianist, but the pressure and demand from special instructors on top of being lonely broke her. She became an empty shell and closed off. However, every so often when he turns on the TV for her, the people and music on screen brings out tears to her eyes. Those people being the supreme artistic geniuses. So he did what any loving father would do and kidnaps those talents in hope it would aid in his daughter's recovery. And it actually works, as once the victim learns about the situation, they meet the daughter one-on-one without the father being there. He doesn't know what they talk about, but hearing his daughter's laughter makes all the moments he lives for. And the victims benefit from this too, as Ron theorized that the reason daughter cried was because she felt sympathy and sensed the same loneliness in them. And when she meets them, they feel healed and manage to recover from the slump they'd gone through. As an artist myself, I relate to the struggle of being in a creative slump, and finding out the lengths the Hummingbird willing to go for his daughter was really sweet, finishing the chapter with a warm feeling inside. However, a crime is still a crime, but he managed to slip away before Toto was about to arrest him. Well, here's to seeing more of him later on in the future. Sorry about that tirade, I just wanted to share a few of my favorite chapters. Let's get back to the plot. The plot starts to develop further in chapter 9, where Toto was sent a mysterious invitation to a meteor shower viewing at an isolated island observatory, and Ron tags along because he sees this as an opportunity to break away from cases due to Toto being almost killed by a poison-laced marker in the previous chapter. When they get there, the director mentions the reason why he invited Toto was because he's Japan's foremost detective, and there was a concern involving a case that happened 10 years ago, so Toto and Ron are here just in case. They arrive at the observatory and meet the rest of the guests, including Blue's close circle instructor, Ron Grizzly, who is acting as a bodyguard. Later on that night, Toto learns from Grizzly about the tragedy that occurred to Ron. He was doing a practical exercise where students work with the police to catch criminals, and Ron, using his intellect, discovered the hideouts of 7 murderers. But when the police entered the hideout, Ron was standing in the middle, covered in blood and holding a knife. It was known as the Bloody Field Trip case, and after some investigation, it was to believe that Ron had no memories of the incident in the 30-minute period that had happened, and it was considered a case of temporary insanity, resulting in Ron avoiding the death penalty and having his license revoked. And it looks like history is being repeated again when, you guessed it, a murder takes place similar to the one that happened 10 years ago, with Ron as the main suspect, as there are no other ways in or out besides the one door, which was locked, and coincidentally, Ron has the only key in his pocket. That's right, everybody, we have ourselves a
locked room mystery! It's an impossible crime!
Things aren't looking good for Ron, to the point where he starts to doubt and almost convince himself that he is crazy. But Toto, being the good friend that he is, raised an interesting point about how the victim was innocent, while all the people Ron tried to pressure kill themselves were criminals. This snaps Ron out of it and his brain activates critical thinking times 20 and brings up some valid points. 1. He's a terrible shot with a gun, and 2. The victim was shot from behind, and even if he took 1,000 tries, he still wouldn't be able to kill her. Plus, at the time of the body discovery, not only was there glass surrounding Ron, who was barefoot, but the telescope was large enough to block both the victim and Ron's from each other's view, meaning that there's no way for Ron to take the shot without cutting his feet open, even if he has good aim. And there's this nice moment where Ron wonders why he isn't anxious as he was 5 years ago, only to realize that it's because he has Toto, the only friend he ever had. One that believes in him and is willing to defend him even when the odds are stacked against him. And it's that loyalty that helps convince Grizzly that Ron is not the culprit and lets him go to join the investigation. And the way the true culprit pulled it off involving a rigging system as well as drugging both the victim and Ron in the locked room in order to frame him. Unfortunately, Grizzly managed to figure it out and try to confront him only to get murdered in the process. After discovering the true culprit, Ron enters kill on sight mode with Toto stopping it, but their efforts are in vain as the culprit takes the cyanide pill. Ron questions why him of all people and if this was planned from the beginning, to which he answered yes, and that Ron will never escape his grasp. Then he dies, and in the next morning, Ron finds a chilling discovery as the spot where the victim was killed has a mark that is the same as the scar on Ron's neck. The same one that appeared after the incident 5 years ago, meaning the people behind this case are the ones responsible for Ron's stolen 5 years of detective work, and the ones that are behind all of this are the M family. The M family are the main antagonists of part 1 and are the equivalent of a mafia family with a bit of Illuminati sprinkled in there. They're considered the peak of the criminal world, and any cases that involve them remain completely unsolved. We get a glimpse of what they're capable of towards the end of chapter 13, where the supposed dead culprit was actually alive, and was promised by the M family that he could avoid death and live a new life if he does a favor for them. Unfortunately, he didn't get the memo that once you live out your usefulness for a criminal family, they tend to leave no trace behind. We then get introduced to siblings Winter and Milo, who discuss Ron and how he doesn't know what the importance of the 96 mark means, and that he'll come to like it eventually, as Milo drops a big reveal that Ron has the blood of both Sherlock freaking Holmes and James Moriarty. More specifically, he's the 9th generation descendant of Moriarty and the 6th generation of Holmes, hence the 96. Although it's one switch away from becoming 69. The story continues to unfold when, after attempting to find the file containing the bloody field trip, Spitz was caught by Principal Emmy, and instead of dealing out a punishment for him, she instead asked to give Ron a message. The message is about how any leads involving the incident have been deleted from both Blue and the police records. The blood sample that was discovered at the crime scene was neither Ron's nor the victim's, and the information that contained said blood sample was deleted as well, leading to Emmy to conclude that there may be a potential third party and the M family was behind it. And the chapter immediately after gives us our first interaction with the duo in Winter. Speaking of, they're probably the most interesting to me out of the family members that we do get to see, as they have a strained relationship with Milo due to him killing their younger sister Alice, making you wonder if they're still in the family and following Milo out of fear and feeling that they have no other options. They were sent by Milo to go to Japan to give Ron a taste of what the M family can do, as well as determine Ron's value as a potential M family member. This leads to one of the most gruesome body discoveries so far, as each victim is a challenge from Winter to Ron to see if he can manage to catch them, using the alias Mary Ito. And Ron succeeds in the battle of wits with Winter by pulling a Uno reverse card on Winter and managed to prevent another victim before it was too late, leaving Winter cornered. Ron questions Winter about their position in the M family and the meaning behind his scar, with Winter kind of answering. They give out the typical no comment answer, but thanks to their statements earlier about Ron being a descendant of Holmes, and if it were up to them, they would kill Ron here and now, Ron figures that the 6 is related to Holmes and that there's someone above them keeping them from talking too much. Then Winter deliberately brings out Ron's kill on sight by confessing to the 2 murders, but when Ron tries to spray them to jump off the roof, they resisted, claiming that they prepared a defense for this and that if they're gonna jump off the roof, they'll do it in their own terms. So they blow up the glass railing behind them and try to make their escape. But Milo intervenes, saying how their sibling failed at their mission with an F- and gives the order to shoot with her dead. Did I say dead? I meant put in critical condition, and the assassin who did the deed and killed the last victim was then disposed of by the order of Milo again, leaving no trace behind. The next time we see them is during the Plateau of Bears serial murders case, one of my favorite cases of part 1 next to the missing cabbage case. This case is about Ron receiving an invitation letter along with a gem that was mailed 17 years ago by the manager of an auberge that his mom's side of the family owns. Here we get a little bit of info about Ron's parents, as Ron's mother, who is later named Romy, is traveling all around the world while Ron doesn't remember much about his father, claiming that he died of an illness before he was born. While the letter may have passed its date, Ron suggests to at least return the emerald to the restaurant. So off they went, meeting various characters as this mystery gets more complicated when, after arriving at the auberge and being served dinner, some of the invited people started to look discomfort at the meals. Doesn't help that afterwards these same individuals are being killed in a similar fashion as the meals that they were served, and are left stranded with no communication to the outside. During this, one of the target mentions that the reason why they might be targeted is due to an involvement of a murder that occurred 17 years ago, where they were hired by a man with a crescent moon birthmark who invited him to the same meals that they were served a while ago. The story distresses Ron because 1, he remembers his father Elliot having a birthmark like that, and 2, he remembers the case that connects everyone there, that the case is being regarded as work of the M family. Meaning the poor guy figured out that he's part of the M family, and the fragmented memories of his father start to come back to him, leaving him in a conflicting and non-existing state. This leads to Toto stepping up to investigate the murders further, and we get to see how far his investigation skills have come. It doesn't take long for Ron to come back to reality, but he decides that because he was trained to become a criminal and has half the blood of his nemesis, he doesn't have a right to become a detective, and this will be his last and final case, no matter what. Ron finally figures out the culprit thanks to a comment made from someone about how there was an explosion sound when the first victim died. That explosion was in fact a cover-up of a dying message left behind the first victim as they were holding up an oniyuri, or tiger lily in English, which led to the culprit being Tiger Dan, the lawyer. Dan confesses the crime as he reveals that he's a member of the M family and wants to reawaken Ron's criminal roots, as Ron can easily replicate a criminal's thought process, as well as eliminate everyone involved in the case because, as you know, Toto points out that it doesn't make sense why the case was a failure now and not 17 years earlier. Dan replies that the M family wanted a kidnapping, not a murder, and Dan proceeds to finish what he started. This triggers one more memory of Ron witnessing Elliot's death and remembering that he wasn't that bad of a person, as he wanted Ron to pursue his own path. Blood ties be damned. Ron regains his resolve and calls out Dan in his BS, claiming the real reason why the M family is now eliminating the people involved in this case because they recently discovered it, having been outwitted by Elliot for so long. Also, the murder wasn't even a murder. Ron figured that his father switched out the body with a dummy corpse, as he believes his father would try to arrange things so nobody involved got hurt. He then proceeds to laugh and give thanks to Dan, as his plan to convince Ron to stop detective work almost worked. But thanks to this case, Ron is more determined than ever to use his intellect to fight the M family. This speech causes Milo to reveal himself using a teddy bear that was casually sitting in the dining room this entire time, saying that he was watching this exchange this whole time, and introduced himself as the eldest son of the M family. Oh yeah, I guess I should talk about his character before moving further on. Milo as a character is as much as a mystery as the rest of the M family, but what we do know is that he upholds the family motto of leaving no trace behind, as well as having a superiority complex, with no qualms of disposing any family members that he deems are failures. It makes you wonder if it was hammered into him as a child by an authority figure, as Winter themselves doesn't show that mightier than thou attitude. But as an antagonist, he really puts Ron through the ringer, testing Ron on his intelligence and taunting him with the lives of innocent people. It's like an older brother who teases their younger brother about how they don't have any toys, knowing that he's the one who took them away in the first place. Hell, the only reason why he left Ron alone this entire time was because he didn't want to be bothered by him, and to congratulate him for his resistance to being converted to a criminal, he reveals that the one who modified his body is a member of the M family, and that soon he'll meet them as a staff member of Blue Academy. Then he blows everyone up. Not to worry, everyone got out of there alive. Even Dan, who I thought Milo would have had someone assassinate him because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. So we were left with a pretty big clue involving the bloody field trip case, as whoever is the spy for the M family is also the true culprit behind the case as the potential third party. And remember when I said that there are 2 more Blue Academy staff members that will cross paths with the duo? Well, it's time to bring them out as I go over them as quickly as I can. Lightning round, baby! There's Finn Finnick, the lockroom instructor and the world's expert on lockroom studies. She, along with her so-called bodyguard Sachi, came across the duo while they were investigating, you guessed it,
Locked room mystery!
And like with Instructor Grizzly, she was on guard and keeping an eye on Ron to see if he was doing any detective work, as she was one of the people who believed that a person with a record like Ron shouldn't be walking freely. Finnick easily solves the mystery behind the locked room, but doesn't reveal the culprit as her goal was just to solve it. Finnick, you do realize by not revealing the culprit, you're allowing them to commit another murder. Yeah, I called it. So because Finnick didn't bother to at least help arrest the culprit, another murder took place. Thankfully, Finnick realized that she should have focused more on preventing more victims and capturing the culprit rather than the mystery itself, thanks to Toto's words. She even lets Ron help with the investigation due to a loophole in one of her father's sayings. So they solved the mystery, the culprit was arrested, and afterwards, in exchange for solving one of the unsolved locked room mysteries, Ron asked Finnick about the bloody field trip incident. She replied that she was only interested in that case because of A, it being a locked room, and B, the unusual actions of the principal who, after the incident occurred, did some personal investigating herself, not knowing that someone was tailing her. And since Finnick was in that area, she approached that person, asking what they were doing in a place like that, to which they replied they were making sure that they didn't leave anything at the crime scene they were working on. Surprised to see the principal walking around and wanted to see what she was up to. And that person is Dr. Hirsch, Blue's anatomy instructor, and the biggest red herring to have come out of this mystery. His actions are filled with so much sus material that I'm surprised that as a joke his hair isn't colored red. Let's just run down the list of how suspicious his actions are, shall we? He was investigating the bloody field trip incident despite the fact that it was documented he was out of the country when the incident occurred, thus he shouldn't have nothing to do with the case. He almost killed Ron while he was a student, and he has been a murder suspect 15 times, but was ruled out due to lack of evidence. Clean evidence, apparently.
Is that also a red flag?
Crimson.
Doesn't help that after his introduction to the duo, he takes every action he could to make himself more shady. You would think after some investigating that he will at least be the culprit of this case, right? Nope. It turns out to be this guy who did whatever this word is, surgery to the victims 20 years ago and was looking for a diamond that was stolen from him, made from his wife's ashes. Wait, is that a thing? Huh, well, you know, guess you learn something new every day. After the case, the duo meet up with Dr. Hirsch to talk about the bloody field trip incident. Hirsch admits that yes, he was on a trip, but was called in from the police to perform the autopsies. He He didn't find anything exceptional about the corpses, but he was impressed that almost all of them have been stabbed in vital areas and died instantly. Ron pushed Hirsch for more information about his involvement with the case by mentioning the Am family, but the second that he did, Hirsch discouraged Ron from investigating further as they were bad news and said that whoever told Ron about the rumor of him being overseas might be involved with the Am family before proceeding to piece the hell out of there. Alright, we got our potential suspects, let's move on to... Just kidding, there's one more person that I need to talk about before I go any further, and that's Elmer Stingray.
Who?
If you're wondering why I haven't mentioned him at all this time, it's because he came out of nowhere. No hints, no brief glimpses, nothing. The first time we see him, he collapses in Ron's apartment and later claims to be Ron's one and only friend at Blue. A friend that Ron doesn't remember despite remembering Sachi even when looking different. A friend who was transferred 3 days before the bloody field trip. And knows about the Am family and Ron's pursuit of them. Initially, I thought he was Milo in disguise, but realized that might not be it because Milo is trying to hurt Ron by giving him a detective's despair. And the case that Elmer was involved with, Toto and Ron, he actively helps with the case. Plus, disguises are more of Winter's specialty, and they're currently in a coma as of now, so the next best theory is that Elmer could be the M family spy. But that doesn't make sense either because Milo said a staff member of Blue, and Elmer doesn't work for Blue. He states that he's a crime researcher and usually works as a consultant for detectives and police. Granted, he could be lying. Guess we'll have to see. But before that, this will be your final spoiler warning as I'm about to spoil the final case of part 1 and the true culprit of the bloody field trip. So if you want to read or watch for yourself on who it could be, skip to this time code to where I give my final thoughts on the manga. I'll give you a minute. To everyone who is left or doesn't care about being spoiled, let's discuss the final case of part 1. The tragic cruise case is the longest case so far in the series, consisting of 21 parts, and right off the bat it doesn't waste any time. As Winter wakes up from their coma, and Milo has been informed that the spy recently made contact with Ron. Milo decides that the time is about right and sends Ron an invitation to the cruise, saying that this is his one and only chance to learn about the bloody field trip, as well as find the one who framed him, as all of the potential suspects will be on the cruise. Finnick, Sachi, Dr. Hirsch, and Elmer Stingray. Ron, of course knowing that it's a trap, wants to prepare as much as he can beforehand by asking Principal Emmy if there's any updated information. Sadly, Spitz told them that she hasn't gotten any info, so it looks like they need to come up with something else. It's then that Winter, after escaping the M family mansion, leaves behind the file containing the original version of the bloody field trip to Ron, looking to see what he can do with this information. After comparing the various testimonies, Ron is able to come up with a clear picture of the situation around him at the time. We then get a flashback of Ron 3 days before the incident where his personality is about the same, just distanced from his peers. At the time, he already solved the location of the murderers and was rather looking for something to pass the time until the day of the joint investigation. So he sought after Finnick, who gave him a difficult case to solve. Then he got some brown sugar syrup from Sachi and went down to the basement room for some peace and quiet to think. It took him 3 days to solve the case, with him waking up on the day of the practical exercise. So he dropped off the assignment in Finnick's mailbox and left an hour before he's supposed to arrive. He remembers when he got there, Big Ben chimed at 4 o'clock and there wasn't anything out of the ordinary other than a child's missing shoe. Then he hears a child's voice along with their kidnapper and tries to figure out a plan. But the child's cries became too much, so he decides to screw it and enters the hideout, only to get tricked as the child's cries were just a recording. The murderers start a brawl with Ron, who effortlessly defends himself against them until one of them pulls out a knife, causing Ron to black out. When he woke up, Big Ben was going off, signaling that it's been an hour, and the first thing he saw was blood, with his body feeling hurt all over and holding a knife. The police then arrive at the scene, and we get the same shot of Ron standing, surrounded by corpses. They arrested Ron, where he was taken to a hospital for injuries and lost 3 hours of memory during that time frame. Finnick was in charge of the investigation, and she found that Ron was the only one to come down that road, and with the river blocking the entrance from the rear and the windows being too small for a person to fit, it was considered to be a locked room. Dr. Hirsch was in charge of the examination of the bodies, and according to the autopsy, the victim's estimated time of death happened while Ron was unconscious, with no signs of the bodies being moved or tampered. This means the murders took place between 4 and 5 o'clock, and all signs point to Ron being the culprit. But thanks to the info Winter gave Ron, he came up with 4 new possibilities for each suspect. For Finnick, lying about the crime scene being a locked room in order to cover up some trick. For Dr. Hirsch, lying about the estimated time of death. For Sachi, drugging Ron with the brown sugar syrup. And for Elmer, for tampering with the file after finding a surveillance recording of him impersonating a police officer. Plus, he finally obtained the missing blood data from the third party, and apparently some of it was splattered on his chest. Ron asks Toto if he wants to save behind, as this was his problem and doesn't want him to get hurt. But after everything these two have been through, is it really a surprise that Toto wants to go and be there for Ron? Well, the stage has been set and it's time for the main event to take place. When they arrive at the cruise, they've been given their ship pass as well as some information about the different floors on the ship, where there will be a welcoming party on the second floor. There we see that everyone is here with varying degrees of BS reasons. Finnick and Sachi are here because her father invited her to see some of the sites the cruise was headed to, as they have many unsolved lockroom cases. Dr. Hirsch doesn't even give his reasons, and Elmer is here based on a hunch that Ron will show up. The only person besides the duo that has a valid reason to be on the cruise is Spitz, who was sadly discovered and dragged off the ship before they even set sail. While exploring the ship, Ron discovers a note left behind by Milo saying that tonight at midnight, someone at the bar will give them a clue about the informant. They get to the bar, the clock strikes midnight, and yep, dead body. Dr. Hirsch, who was there at the time, found the cause of death was poison. Poison that seemed to come from the wine. Wine that was requested by the mechanical sounding male voice on the ship's phone. So the news of a murder traveled to the captain, who suggested securing the crime scene and the passenger's safety. It's then revealed that the M family has a firmer grip on the voyage than it was previously thought, as the captain's family is being held hostage and is ordered to not stop the voyage. Back at the duo, someone broke into their room and destroyed Ron's satellite phone, getting rid of any chance of contacting anyone back at the mainland. Milo calls them and informs them that the spy was the culprit, and from now on, starting tomorrow, they will kill someone new each day, and the only way to stop them is to find out who they are. And, well, kill them. The clock is ticking, and the duo prepares to take some measures in order to be safe. These measures will be revealed later, but for now, the next day occurs with Ron approaching Finnick saying he acquired new information about the incident, and asks how the crime scene was a locked room, to which she replied similar to what she reported. However, she did say that Ron's behavior the day of the incident was out of character for him, with Sachi backing her up, claiming that he spotted Ron hurrying towards the school gate. Speaking of, Ron takes this opportunity to ask Sachi why in the world did he buy all of the sugar brown syrup, and Sachi responds by saying he was making a lot of Japanese sweets. Ron finds this incredibly interesting, but before he could question him further, a cry for help was heard from outside, and everyone rushed to see where it came from. Well, it's not from the left or from the right. Maybe they can try to check from a... Shit. Okay, a second murder has occurred, and the duo plus Sachi climb up the stairs to the upper floor, only to find that the door won't open. After breaking down the door, they find a woman along with some rubber plugs.
It was later explained that the two women were drugged from behind. When the first one woke up, she was tied up and used a knife that was nearby to cut herself free. What she didn't realize at the time, there was the other woman who was drugged hanging from the same rope she was tied up from, and when she cut herself free, the other woman fell to her death. The other woman being the victim's best friend. As for the rubber plugs, they were there to prevent anyone from coming out on deck until the woman freed herself, with Finnick deducing that the swaying of the ship could cause some of them to get caught under the door if placed near the front of it. During this, Ron figures out that the culprit is setting out to make the most tragic murders possible, as well as to provoke Ron into anger and use the gun, as each perpetrator was someone who cared about the victim. Things are starting to heat up, and the duo needs to find and catch the culprit before anyone else dies. Toto then comes up with a great idea, to gather the suspects and see their hesitation to the poison wine, with the exception of Dr. Hirsch, who was there at the scene. Elmer was the first one, and he drank it right away, only commenting that the aura isn't the same as he remembers. Finnick and Sachi are next, and at first they were reluctant to drink it, but after explaining that it's camouflage for the investigation, Sachi immediately goes for it, with Finnick saying that she doesn't want any right now. During this, Finnick mentions that she discovers Dr. Hirsch's detective license where the second day's murder occurred and suspects him. Along with finding out the reception desk that holds the phone line was empty, and as if they summoned him, Dr. Hirsch arrives at the table and Finnick shows him his detective license. Hirsch looks surprised and said that he's been looking for it as he noticed it was gone all afternoon and hasn't gone up to the deck where it was discovered. He has no idea how it got there, but knows he's likely being framed and blames Sachi for the death as he was the one who found it. This leads into an argument between Dr. Hirsch and Sachi, with Finnick suspecting anyone with any suspicious behavior, as she believes the culprit will strike again. With no other options, Ron decides to reveal the murders were the work of the M family informant to all of the suspects. The reason being to keep a better eye on them, so one by one they gather everyone into a room where immediately there's a three-way blame game on who it could be. Well, at least it's for a few hours. Some time passes and we get to hear some backstory on Finnick and Sachi's relationship. Turns out Sachi's family served Finnick's for generations, with it supposed to end with Finnick's father. But Sachi's parents insisted on sending him to her at a young age, and they've been inseparable ever since, with Sachi helping her with detective work and putting himself at risk for her, saying that he has nowhere else to go. Dr. Hirsch then finds a crumpled piece of paper with an ominous message about the third victim that will occur. He deduces that it's an ADHOC murder declaration, as the note says in 10 minutes past midnight, a murder will occur in the room that ends in 01. And since the room has 3 digits, that means rooms 101, 201, 301, 401, 501, and 601 are all in potential danger. There are 6 of them, so each one can go and guard one of the rooms to prevent the murder, and if a murder still takes place, then the one who went to that room is the murderer. Ron is the only one against this, saying that this is likely a trap and that they're playing into the culprit's plan. But with the possible threat of time-delayed tricks like a bomb, he retracts his statement and assigns everyone to a room, saying that they need to return back to the same room at 12:20, no matter what happens. Everyone proceeds to split off, and the rooms that Ron and Toto went to separately checked are fine. Ron figures the rooms were bait and just a way to separate them, and asks Toto if he noticed anything, with Toto complaining why the ship has 7 floors but the passenger cabins have 6. Ron then figures out that the note didn't have a number written on it, but a word. The word being pool, which is located on the 7th floor. They arrive just in time as the culprit is making their escape. Toto jumps in to save the still alive victims, and Ron pursues the culprit but couldn't catch them in time. Lucky for him, they dropped an important item, Ron's satellite phone.
Hey, Editor Max here. That's not Ron's satellite phone. That's actually the culprit's. I didn't realize this until editing this part. And yeah, this goes to show why you need to double check your scripts. Anyway, to clarify, that is not Ron's satellite phone. That is indeed the culprits, considering how in this panel right here, he actually looks back to be like, oh crap, my phone, I dropped it. So yeah, just in case you got confused with my wording there. Anyway, back to the show.
The rest of the group came up to see where the duo went, and Ron gave out the solution to the note as well as interrogating the victims. Like with the last two murders, the victims were close to one another and were staying in separate rooms, when they both got a message from the reception saying they have an idea and to meet at the pool. They arrived, got drugged, and when they came to, they were both blindfolded with one being tied to the other's back and under the water. When asked about the voice on the phone call and their room numbers, they replied the voice sounded modified by a voice changer and that they live in rooms 5202 and 523 respectively, meaning Elmer should have noticed them but he didn't. Everyone gives their report on each room they checked. Rod said that there was nothing unusual in room 601, same for Toto in room 101, same for Finnick in room 201, Sacha apparently got yelled at in room 301, Dr. Hirsch had no problems in room 401, and the same is for Elmer in room 501. Ron said that after confirming the final piece, he's going to reveal the culprit, and asked the suspecting party to wait in the room just a little bit longer. On the deck, Ron called Spitz about any information about the ship as well as the DNA test results from the blood data. Spitz replied saying that there's nothing unusual about the ship and appears to have a normal voyage. And he got a DNA match of the blood data thanks to him posing as a server earlier and collecting their glasses of water. And this blood is to be revealed as Elmer's blood. With the final clue in place, Ron solved the mystery and headed back to the room to go confront the culprit. But not before thanking Toto for always believing in him and getting him out of his depressing funk he had before.
What kind of cold, heartless person would break apart such a loving relationship? I would!
Yeah, this isn't surprising. The gas proceeds to knock the duo out and we cut to Milo, who looks like he's on his way to the cruise, saying that it's time for the final phase to begin. Ron wakes up in the theater room where a magic show is happening, noticing that Toto isn't around, and before he has any more time to think, he spots the same gun that was taunting him this whole trip is about to be used for the next trick. Ron stops the actors and dashes towards the stage, taking the gun before it can do any more damage. He spots the four suspects being unconscious, and the Milo teddy bear makes its grand re-entrance, giving him an ultimatum. Kill the true culprit and the passengers' lives will be spared. Since Ron already knows who it is, he lays it all out as I will do now. So, without further ado,
here's everything that happened in this case.
There are a few factors to consider about this case: the wine, the rubber plugs, and the voice changer. For the rubber plugs, someone would have to calculate the ship's swaying motion in order for the plugs to perfectly jam the door. For the voice changer, witnesses claim that they heard a mechanical male voice, or at least similar to that, and that there's someone who can take advantage of that. And for the wine, there was only one person who didn't drink it. All of these factors lead to Finnick being the true culprit. But if you have been paying attention, you'll realize that Finnick isn't the culprit. Something that Ron was waiting for, as when he turns the gun on Finnick, Sachi unintentionally reveals himself to be the true culprit. Ron explains that Finnick was acting unsuspicious during the three murders. However, with Sachi, not only did he drink the supposed poisoned wine despite the fact at the welcome party he declined in favor of drinking juice, he also did a little hiccup. When everyone gave the reports on the room they were supposed to check, Sachi said he got yelled at by the people in the room. The question is, how can that be when there was no one in that room, as that was Ron and Toto's new room? Remember those safety measures I mentioned a while ago? It's revealed that Ron and Toto moved to a different room in order to avoid the culprit breaking in again, something they both decided to keep a secret and never mention to anyone. So the one behind the murders of the ship and the true culprit of the bloody field trip incident is Sachi. As for the mystery behind the incident, it's a shocker as Ron figures out the way Sachi framed him was a time trick, as his consciousness and the actual day of the crime were staggered by a day. The syrup that Sachi gave him was a sleeping drug, and when Ron drank it, he fell asleep, giving Sachi the chance to change the date on his phone forward by a day. By the time he woke up, he thought it was the day of the practical exercise, went to the warehouse early, and you know the rest. But if Ron went to the warehouse early, won't people notice that he's missing? And the answer is simple, as there was an imposter disguised as Ron, while the real one was unconscious. And on the day of the incident, they went to the warehouse, killed everyone inside, pulled Ron from the hiding spot he was in, dressed Ron with the blood-spattered uniform they had on, threw the disguise out the window into the sea, and stabbed themselves in the chest, quickly putting the knife in Ron's hand before slowly bleeding to death. And the evidence to back up that claim is thanks to Elmer's blood. Earlier on the voyage, Elmer mentions that Ron helped him with an injury, and some of his blood went on the vest. And since Ron wasn't a sociable person and was knocked out in the warehouse, the only possible explanation would be an imposter. With all of the facts laid out, Sachi finally admits that he's the true culprit, and we get this really beautiful shot of Ron as he finally solved the mystery that's been haunting him for 5 years, and relieved that he didn't kill anyone. But there's no time to celebrate, as Milo mentions that there's someone missing in this room, Toto. And the audience finally starts to realize this is starting to get dangerous and tries to leave, but is held at gunpoint by Sachi. He explains that in 10 minutes, these devices here will release nerve gas, and if anyone tries to forcibly open the doors, they will release the gas early. Milo gives Ron a method to save the audience by saying the door on his left doesn't have a motion sensor, and if he destroys the lock, everyone will go free. But like with everything that involves Milo, there has to be a catch. And well, you know, there's a catch. The catch is Toto is behind that door and is positioned to be shot and killed if Ron decides to shoot the door, leaving Ron to decide if he wants to sacrifice Toto for the audience safety. Ron says screw that and tries to figure out another way to save both Toto and the audience. During this, Ron asks Milo something that I was wondering myself when I first read this. Is he only bothering Ron with all these elaborate plans because he is descendant of Holmes and thus has to reestablish the status quo with this rivalry? No, not really. This is just me speculating, but based on what he said in response on top of what's shown later, I think it's because he wants to bring Ron down to his level. Remember the sister he killed? He may have shown that he doesn't care, but deep down he feels immense guilt for it, coming up with excuses for himself that she was weak. This is the only way for him to become head of the family. And with Ron, he wants him to feel the same despair as he did, showing that he's just as bad as the rest of the descendants of Moriarty. Ron is running out of time and tries to see if he can shoot the hinges off, but Sachi interrupts, saying that unlike his gun, that there's only one bullet. Then Elmer, who woke up early, pretends that he has a gun, tricking Sachi to shoot the door and leaving Ron a chance to save Toto. He does this by using a chair which is projected onto the wall in front of Toto through the hole. The image is something that only the two would know about and gives Toto the message he needs to dodge. So Ron shoots the door and saves Toto, minor injuries aside. With the plan failed, Sachi grabs the unconscious Fennec and books it out of the room, same with the passengers. He tried to escape by the deck but was shot and collapsed. After pursuing Sachi, the duo finally come face to face with Milo himself. He explains that the reason he's here is because he was hoping to see the tragedy of Ron shooting his partner dead. But since that's not happening, he's going to kill the failure to make up for it instead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm usually far more composed. I'm just a little bit absolutely livid.
But before Milo puts a cap in Sachi, Ron wants to ask Sachi something, or rather confirm something for him. That the reason why he was working for the M family is for Fennec, who was under threat multiple times throughout her detective career by the M family, and every time Sachi begs them to spare her life. Fennec, finally waking up and hearing all of this, asks why Sachi would do all of this, and while he doesn't say it, it's heavily implied that he loves her. Fennec said that she should have realized his actions sooner and would rather die than be complacent in crimes. Now that everything has been solved, there's one more thing Ron has to ask. What did Sachi do to Ron's body during the incident? Sachi doesn't get to answer that as Milo shoots him dead. This causes Ron's kill on sight to trigger as he didn't take his meds that day and tells Milo to shoot himself in the head. It looks like he's about to do it, leaving Toto to try to stop Milo, but...
Psych!
At the very least, Ron is released from his kill on sight as he tries to help a fatally injured Toto. Milo explains that the kill on sight acts like a hypnosis. The person is drawn to Ron's eyes and his voice goes directly in their mind, with his strong suggestion drawing out suicidal impulses in them. But if you have, say, a sound altercation device in your ears, it won't work on you. Feeling like he's won, Milo tempts Ron with the knowledge of what was done to his body during the incident if he kills Toto with the knife he threw at him. Ron, having enough with this shit, does something completely unexpected for Milo. Under his kill on sight mode, he asks Milo to drop the gun and stab himself, and Milo is obeying them despite the altercation devices still in his ears. Toto stops Ron by saying that this isn't him, and if he kills Milo now, then all that work of proving his innocence will be for nothing. This snaps Ron out of it, and Milo starts to become desperate as he's willing to die if he can make Ron break the detective's taboo of never killing anyone, and keeps taunting him. He even produces a second gun from his sleeves and shoots Fennec to push him even further.
Come on, I want you to do it, I want you to do it, come on, hit me, come on, hit me!
Ron realizes that this can't go any longer unless he does something risky, and he does so by stabbing his vocal cords and passing out. Having no more tricks, Milo admits defeat, drops the flash drive, and throws himself off the ship into the ocean, with his last thoughts being of Alice. 2 months have passed, and a couple things happened during that time. For starters, the M family is in disarray after the stunt Milo pulled, as it was seen as an unforeseen turn of events. Something that Winter themselves came to tell Toto after he was admitted to the hospital. He asked them why Milo was so fixated on Ron killing him, and they gave a theory similar to the one I said earlier. They just don't believe that Milo cared about their sister at all. And then they left, but we'll see more of them later on in the second part. As for the 3 surviving suspects, Fennec was discharged and went back to England, probably gonna take a break from detective work after the hell she experienced. Dr. Hirsch left complaining that he wasted a trip before proceeding to go on another vacation to make up for it. And as for Elmer, he just gave Toto a letter telling him to give it to Ron when he's better before proceeding to peace out as well, back to his country in the States. Currently, Toto receives a call from the hospital telling him that Ron has been discharged from the hospital and the surgery for his throat went well. And Ron seems to be doing well for himself, just can't speak for a while until his throat fully heals, leaving it to some pretty funny interactions involving a small whiteboard. After settling down in his apartment, Ron is given the letter and it turns out the recipient is his mom, and she's an interesting character, or at least sounds like it from the way that the letter was written. So she explains in the letter that Elmer is an assistant working for the Holmes family, and when she heard the rumor that Ron was being targeted, she gave Elmer a plane ticket and some time off, saying to do as he liked. She also said that she knew Ron would love it if he could figure it out himself, but spoiled it for him and hoped to see him soon. Honestly, Ron's response summed up my feelings on that. Well, at least I can look forward to seeing more of the mom later, especially since she's going to have to explain some things involving Ron's childhood. Mafu comes by with great news. The data that has been left on the cruise ship was given to Mafu, who finished analyzing the data and determined the cause of Ron's kill on sight, giving him the chance to be cured from it. But that's not all, as Spitz comes in telling Ron that the evidence he gave to Principal Emmy was enough for his punishment to be overturned, as she passed on a message to the World Detective Alliance, who sent him a letter saying Ron is given the right to take the detective license examination. Then Ron proceeds to act similar to me when I receive great news, as the only thing he can say is, "This is amazing." We get one more final scene as we see Milo washed up on the shore begging for water as he is approached by complete strangers asking for his name. He doesn't get a chance to lie as they already know his name and are about to treat him like he's a bug they need to scrape off. They say that times are changing and that a new head has entered the playing field. One that Milo seems to recognize before he gets strangled to death, ending the chapter on an ominous note. Finally! That didn't take as long as it did, right? Right? So, what do I think about this manga? Well, considering that I spent almost an hour on this recording, I think you can get an idea. Trust me when I say I had a lot more I wanted to talk about. It was honestly nice to read an engaging mystery, as I feel, with some exceptions, that there aren't that many detective mysteries nowadays. So, if you're looking for a classic detective mystery novel, I would highly recommend this manga to you. And I hope you will enjoy this as much as I did, as I excitedly wait to see what the duo is gonna come across next. And considering what's happening in part 2 right now, we've only just got started with how crazy this manga is going to be.
Well, I'm glad that's over for now. I want to thank everybody who watched my videos, and I hope you don't mind me rambling on for another few minutes. I just wanted to go over some few points. First of all, the link to my socials will be down in the description below. My socials being Twitter and Facebook. I'm a lot more active on Twitter, sort of. I've mostly just been posting like video updates as well as some memes. And my Instagram is there to, well, it's mostly just me posting art. Speaking of art, the stills were created by me, and there'll be another link to my Fiverr down below too. So if you need any help with art, I can gladly help you with that. What else? Oh yeah, my next video. It'll probably be out like maybe late February, because coming up is the newest Persona game, and yeah, I would like to take a break, please. But I will be back hopefully by late February. What else do I need to talk about? Oh yeah, the progress. I am currently middle of recording the next video, so you don't have to worry about too much. And again, I post updates on my Twitter and also my YouTube community tab, so check those out if you want to know how the videos are going. Anyway, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear more from me. And I hope you have a good morning, afternoon, or night, or whatever time period that you're in. And yeah, see ya. Bye.
Take a deep breath.